Did you know that livestock grazing land makes up more than 1/4 of the habitable land on the planet? Cows account for the majority of this. In this speech, I'm going to discuss the environmental impact of beef production, the land use and overall energy loss from farming beef, and the health concerns from eating beef. In a 2006 book titled Livestock's Long Shadow: Environmental Issues and Options, the authors discuss land use by livestock. They state 70% of previous forested land in the Amazon is occupied by pastures, and feed crops cover a large portion of the remainder. This is discussing the deforestation of the Amazon, and so this basically affects the climate because there's less trees. The Amazon forest is one of the largest forests on Earth, and when there's less trees, that accounts for less carbon capture. So more of the emissions that we produce is going to be going into the atmosphere. And this is a totally unnecessary thing because there's other sources of protein that require much less land and energy to produce, such as chickens and turkeys. In a book titled Tackling Climate Change Through Livestock, a global assessment of emissions and mitigation opportunities, the authors analyzed data from 2005 of greenhouse emissions from various livestock around the world. Total emissions from cattle meat purposes is 2,495 million tons of carbon dioxide. This is over 4 times the amount that is produced from chickens. So I have a visual here, and this graphic is actually from the study which I just cited. So over here is beef cattle, so that's from meat. That's almost 2,500 million tons of CO2 produced. And then we have dairy cattle, which is for milk and butter, cheese. And all the way down here is chicken meat. So these emissions are calculated for all aspects of the production. So that's raising the animal, feeding it, butchering it, and for transportation as well. Eating beef can also be harmful to your health. The number 1 cause of death worldwide is heart disease. In a 2021 article on the University of Oxford's website titled Red and Processed Meat Linked to Increased Risk of Heart Disease, Oxford study shows, the author is discussing the findings of a 30-year study. They state 50 grams per day higher intake of unprocessed red meat, such as beef, lamb, and pork, increased the risk of coronary heart disease by 9%. There was no clear link between eating poultry, such as chicken and turkey, and an increased risk of coronary heart disease. These findings are going to be attributed to the high saturated fat content that's in red meat. So basically, if you eat beef regularly, you're at a higher risk of heart disease. These other sources of protein, such as turkey and chicken, even tofu or beans, are just healthier for you than beef. So some things that you can do, that I'm going to ask you to do, is to replace some beef in your diet with other protein. So, for example, when you go to the store to buy ground beef for tacos, instead buy some ground turkey. Prepare it the same way. It's just as good, I promise. I love making turkey burgers, ground turkey. I love turkey chili. It's one of my favorite things to make. I promise you it is just as good. Something else you can do is to tell people some of the facts that you've learned today, and maybe they will change their habits along with you. So in this speech, I have discussed the negative environmental impact of the production of beef, the logically wasteful nature of its farming, and the adverse health implications from the consumption of beef. Now that you have been educated on the subject, I will ask you to think of the greater good of the planet and all humans as well, and to examine your own consumption habits today.